This is an SM Media production. Hi folks, and welcome to episode 3 of Chronicle, the Rangers Journey. I'm Scott Pike. It's an absolute pleasure to be your host as always. We are now entering into the David Murray era of Rangers Football Club. We've done 2 prologues so far where we looked at the need for a figure like Graeme Souness and David Murray to enter the club. We are now at that stage in 1988 when David Murray takes over. Joining me on this part of the journey is Martyn Ramsay, who is obviously the author of the 50 Greatest Rangers Games, and is sort of in the middle of his own project with this called Dominant, where he has done a podcast look at this period from 86 to 98. So everything we're going to talk about, Martyn will know like the back of his hand. Martyn, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you on to Chronicle. Thank you very much for joining me.
My pleasure, Scott. Good to be here. And yeah, a lot of this is very much at my fingertips at the minute. I seem to be living the 80s and 90s, but that's no bad thing.
Yeah, it's a period where obviously a lot of things change outside and inside football, but we'll start obviously with what we know about David Murray's his ambitions to take over the club. Lawrence Marlborough, obviously the owner at the time, the kind of majority shareholder, he was looking to get out of Rangers. He was looking to kind of move his projects to America, where he was based. He was always keen to kind of sell the club, wasn't he? It was never really a thing where he wanted to have the kind of family dynasty like it was in his family for years. Is that fair to say?
Yes and no. I don't. You're right. I don't think he saw this as him grabbing control for the Lawrence family again, and they'll still be in charge in 30 years in some shape or form. I don't think he saw that as a grand plan, because he was basically an absentee owner. He was happy to stay out the way. He was very happy, trusted David Holmes implicitly, and there are very few examples of an owner chief exec, as Holmes was initially before becoming chairman later on that first season, relationship like that where Holmes had control. Holmes didn't have a shareholding there, so Holmes didn't own. He wasn't the majority shareholder. So that was actually quite rare in football, and I think it worked quite well. Holmes had that detachment. He worked for Marlborough, and he was accountable to Marlborough and the board, but all but one of whom were Marlborough's men. So I think there was a lot of focus about the Rangers board at that time. There's been a narrative since that, look, the Lawrence Group, Rangers were losing the money in terms of that original stake. How about you either get out or you get full control and make it something, tart it up and sell it on? I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think there was it wasn't a flip job. The reason that Marlborough got out was because things started to go wrong in America. And he needed to get his focus on Nevada and his investments there, really. So it was not a necessity. It wasn't, a kind of Abramovich style thing where he has to get rid of this thing, but it was becoming I could do with getting out of this particular thing and try to salvage the business, which ultimately didn't really happen. So Souness at the start of 88, 89 gets the feeling that things aren't quite right with Holmes. He wonders if he's just been a bit beleaguered after that difficult 87, 88 season where David Holmes took a bit of buffeting as well as Souness and Smith did. But his hunch was correct that actually, no, he wanted out. Murray had a very successful business, obviously, in steel and other media projects, and sporting projects, the kind of basketball thing, and he owns hotels. One of which was where Souness stayed when he first arrived through in Edinburgh in '86. That's kind of how they met, actually. So they were pals. they went out for dinner at Raffaelli's in Edinburgh every Friday night. That was their date night. And Ayr United had not come off. They had blocked that move. And Souness basically said, "What are you wasting your time at that kind of level? If you're going to get involved in football, get involved in the top. There's someone like you, and you know, this is what 1988. David Murray, the David Murray story at that point typifies parts of Britain at that time, especially
there's a lot of success in there, but it's fair to say that wasn't the profile that he was aiming for, like that Rangers would give him. Was that fair to say?
In what sense?
Like, he's obviously made his money, and that, like, he's not buying Rangers to make money. He's buying Rangers for the profile.
No, I think it's becoming an ego thing for sure.
Yes.
He wants a bit of fun, to be honest, and there's a bit of a drama. He is from here. He purports to be an Ayr United fan, but that get blocked. Souness says, "Yeah, you're wasting your time. Well, why would a man like you be involved at that kind of level? If you're going to do it right." And he suggested, "Look, I've got a feeling Lawrence Marlborough might sell up. Actually, I've got a feeling that not all is well."
Yes.
And Murray said, "Well, ask." And he did, and he was right. Said, "Well, yeah, we would." The Lawrence family is, I think, is a book in itself. There's some division there. There was some division there. There still is some division there. And part of the family, in terms of brothers and cousins, felt this, for £6 million, this was undervalued. Spurs had floated recently. They were 83, I think they'd floated. And there's a few in the family felt like £6 million is a steal. You know, English clubs don't have access to Europe that we do. You've got this stadium which looks space age compared to anything else in British football. What that didn't take into consideration was the overdraft £6 million at this point. So really, it's kind of 12 million is the kind of sum. But part of the Lawrence family didn't think this was right, wanted another bidder. Asked Robert Maxwell, would he be interested? He was, and that got fed back to the kind of Murray camp, and the deal went into overdrive, and I think it was signed with 3 minutes to midnight one night in Ibrox. And Souness being a part of that, Souness being a director, Souness putting 600
grand in to buy a 10% stake in the club.
Yeah,
which made the manager. He was the second largest shareholder.
Yeah, 10% stake, I think, of Murray's stake. So, and he get the guarantee price on the way out. But that's unheard of. I don't think that really gets the traction that it probably deserves. Of a football man in 1988.
I don't think it's something you see now. I don't think it's something you're going to see now.
No. Well, it's probably impossible now to that kind of percentage. But for a football manager to put 600 grand into a club in 1988, that 600 grand in that money, and become technically player manager director. But Souness said he loved it. He loved that thrill, and also at that point wanted to absolutely quash any, because from the 86, the narrative for the press is right. This won't last. These guys are mercenaries. First of all, they won't understand it. They won't really get it. And 87, 88's proved that. I told you this was a flash in the pan. You know, these guys will bolt soon. They're not here for the long term. Souness won't be here for the long term. He's not got the patience for this. So I think that was again another part of his thinking that no, he is here for. At that point, he would have seen you for the absolute long haul in some kind of capacity, and even moving upstairs as it were at some point. If the manager's job just got too much, which eventually did, but a sensational kind of move. But Souness engineered that. He obviously got Murray involved, and they went out for dinner as usual on the Friday night before the first game of the Murray era wasn't the chairman, right enough. David Holmes remained as chairman until the end of that season. And Murray had said, "Oh, no, I'm too busy, gets too many other projects, too many other interests. I will put in a chief exec effectively," which is another story. But he wanted David Holmes to remain there, which he did until the end of the season. So, but Murray, the first game of the Murray era was a home game against Aberdeen, and Souness said the night before that Murray said it'd be good if we won tomorrow, and then he said no. I think we really need to win tomorrow, and you could just Souness said you can just see it already getting under his skin that he's going to get absolutely invested in this emotionally. The big takeaway, Scott, which is part of the Murray mythology, is that not a penny went to Rangers.
No.
That 6 million is to Lawrence Marlborough.
No, there's been different versions of it. It's always been the kind of the narrative. The Murray narrative was always he paid the 6 million. Then it became the bank gave him the 6 million, and then the narrative, as far as I was aware, was that he just took on the Lawrence overdraft. Like there's been so many different versions of it. You've never really been able to kind of point down what the actual story is.
I mean, he did the deal, and he oversaw investment. He oversaw investment in the stadium. He oversaw investment in the team. But I guess where that story maybe gets conflated with other football ownership stories in the late 90s, 21st century is of chairman, or even your Jack Walker, who bought his club and put millions of his own money into his club. That was funded. That went straight. His literal fortune went into buying Alan Shearer, for example. And that never happened. But the mythology just get weaved into so many of those owners. Then you get the kind of giants that come into English football in the 2000s. So that's been something he's kind of spun. Even the club deck, which opened in November 91, or December 91, sorry. The Murray, he made that happen. He profited from it. His steel business was quite heavily involved. But the fans paid up to £8 million, I think, in terms of the bond scheme. There was a £2 million grant. So he was very good at spinning the tale that he was a provider, when in fact he asked fans to go to the well time and time again. But that will come through the various weeks of your show, I think. Yeah,
we will touch on that quite a lot. But on the part though, Rangers are coming off a bad season, as you say. Obviously, the Celtic winning the centenary double. But Rangers did strengthen again going into the English market. Gary Stevens, Kevin Drinkle. That 88-89 season is a very unlucky season when you think of the fact that nearly ends in a treble. We'll touch on the final in just a minute, but obviously a League Cup, the third League Cup in a row, crucial 5-1 and 4-1 wins against Celtic lead to a title win with 6 points. That first season of the first half season of the kind of Murray era, if you will, that Souness obviously that's the first of the 9. We'll touch on the 9 obviously in the next couple of weeks, but that season was when he's at 6 points, but there's big wins against Celtic that contribute to that league win.
Yeah, I mean, Murray comes in the November of that year, that season, by which point Rangers have got a good command. This is an extremely underrated Rangers team.
Yes.
I think this is probably Souness's best team. Maybe the balance of the season after 89-90. It's a super team. He has Richard Gough still earmarked for right back, because of course Graham Roberts was the big departure at the end of that troublesome season. He wanted Mark Wright of Derby County, up and coming centre half. So he still wanted a centre half to play with Terry Butcher, who was fully fit now. Coming back, and Richard would go out to right back until he found out that the best right back in Britain wanted a change from Everton and Gary Stevens. So he could do that deal, and that's really when Gough and Butcher became a thing. His target man obsession, Haitley he wanted again, and that got pied. So he went for Kevin Drinkle, who again was an up and coming player.
Very effective as well. Very effective as well.
Ferguson wanted him to come to Manchester United, and that he couldn't make that happen, and Rangers could. There's a big thing here, Scott, which is kind of been overlooked. Rangers did not start well in '86. They did not start well in '87 in the league. The pre-season of '87 is a shambles. It's an absolute mess, and he gets that right. For the first time, they go to Italy, up in the Tuscan Hills at Il Choco, and the players rave about it. They talk about just how difficult it was up in altitude and gasping for air, gasping for drink. But they felt when they came home that their lungs were about 3 times the size. They felt so fit. And what you see, encapsulated perfectly with the 5-1, is a roaring start to the season. So that by the time October comes and Aberdeen beat us at Pittodrie in the Gerrard injury, which was a huge setback emotionally, as well as in the playing staff, and Souness is now starting to become utterly paranoid about injuries with Gough, with Colin West in his first season, Butcher in his second, and now Gerrard. But Rangers kind of got into a place where they just held everyone at arm's length because of that incredible start to the season. It was just turbo charged, 5-1, 4-1. I mean, it's just the stuff of dreams. The League Cup, we kind of getting to expect that now. But the possibly for the future, the key game was in April Fool's Day at Parkhead, winning there for the first time in 9 years. Yeah, an absolute torrid place to go. And it could have, they had a penalty with 8 minutes to go and they missed that. It could have been 2-2. So it's a really good season. If Aitken's not allowed to take that throw, and if Gary Stevens, who was immaculate for a season and that cup final, doesn't make that poor pass back, if Butcher's goal isn't disallowed for very little, if Souness doesn't put himself on the bench and risks Derek Ferguson with a bit of a shoulder problem, and he felt he was going to get preyed on. He had a bit of injuries in that final. Wilkins was out as well. And if they managed to do that treble, then that season would be lionised. But Jerry McNee had written, and it must have been the Express in the couple of weeks before it, he said it would be better for Celtic to lose this, see Rangers parade a treble, and really for the Celtic board to be under proper pressure to get their act together. This is papering over the cracks if they win this cup final. And it kind of did in a way, but it was an exceptional season, actually.
Yeah, obviously the cup final, Joe Miller scores the goal for Celtic to deny that team a treble, but the main thing from that is there's a whisper of a former Celtic player returning to Parkhead, and that is Maurice Johnston. The chat, the story of this goes up and down every time you hear it from different people. At that final, Celtic thought that was done. Celtic thought they had Johnston.
The fans did. Celtic, everybody at Celtic thought they had it done the week before. 2 weeks before, the middle of the final week of the season, so between the penultimate league game and the final league game of the season, Johnston's paraded at Celtic Park, and the kit, and so the team I wanted to play for, and blah blah blah. As everyone knows, Bill McMurdo was at Ibrox on the final league game of the season. Aberdeen batter as it happens, but it's proof by day. It's a bit of a party. Souness bumps into him. Oh, if only we'd known we'd have been in for him. Is he joking? No, absolutely not. I say, well, it's not done yet. And there was haggling over something, as there always was with that Celtic board. Yeah. Souness speaks to Smith. Has to pick him up off the floor, I think, and then they take it to Murray. And I think it's Murray that wanted a bit more time, but by the Sunday, I think he phoned Souness and said, like, go for it. Souness goes to France that week with McMurdo and Johnston. Johnston, by the way, is on the Celtic bus. He's in Love Street on that final league game of the season with the boys, back in the fold. Prodigal son returns. But it's still not done. They're still haggling over bits and pieces. And within that week, it's pretty much agreed. He's going to, personal terms, he's going to come here. So people know it. Campbell Ogilvie knows it, Murray knows it, sitting up in Hampden that day when one side of Hampden is very much proclaiming their new son, and the other side of Hampden are telling them very much what they think of him. Because this was a problem, Scott. I remember my dad getting me up for school, and as would be the routine then, the radio alarm or whatever that kind of got him up, and Clyde One would have the kind of sports desk in the morning, and it was broken that he was going to Celtic. So bad news, Mo Johnston's going back to Celtic. So is that bad? He said, no, that is quite bad. He's a great player.
Yes.
So it's starting to go, and you see actually the reports after the cup final starting to get, this might not be done, and then I think by the end of that week, Johnston's saying, look, sorry guys, I wish it could happen, we just couldn't get it over. I just want to go on with my career now. Celtic are holding firm. Billy McNeil says, do not let this go. There's the FIFA under-16 World Cup in Scotland, which was roar-away success. Scotland obviously lose from a 2-0 winning position in the final and penalties. Of course they do.
To a suspect Saudi Arabia team.
A very suspect Saudi Arabia team. But Sepp Blatter's there on this business, but he's also there to give basically a FIFA ruling. Celtic have a letter saying there's a kind of a statement of intent, really, that this should happen. And Blatter says, well, I think that's binding unless otherwise agreed. And that's the kind of crucial part. And the wider media pressure is on Celtic. Just tell us Naff to bolt. He shouldn't be messing you around. It's turning into a bit of a circus. You'll find another club. You're better off without him. McNeil absolutely going apoplectic at the Celtic board. He thinks we hold these, pay the rest, pay the 700 grand that you still owe not, and we own the player. So whoever wants him has to come and bargain with us. But who's going to bargain with a player who doesn't want to be there? He might hold his registration, but it's a farce. Celtic they didn't have an option. Scotland were due to play England at Hampden the week after that friendly. England won 2-0. Steve Bull scored 2. And McNeil had bars his way in down at Largs, or down at Seamull, sorry, to speak to Johnston. He said, don't you fuck with me. If you do this, I'll make your life, your career's get over, kind of thing. And he'd just been on the phone to Souness by the time he got in to see McNeil. And he's telling Butcher, I'm going to be playing with you next season. And Butcher said, what's I thought he was trying to get in his head, and he said, yeah, I'm going to kick you up in the park. I said, no, I'm going to be playing with you. And this is the trip where Johnston had to tell McCoy. So McCoy just couldn't, he said he had to put his pillow over his head. He just couldn't cope with what he just heard. So, and obviously after the final, the cup final, Souness had chucked his runners-up medal in the bath and all that, and it said something, well, they might be celebrating now, but I've got something up my sleeve that's going to knock them out, kind of thing. And the players tired season, just like, yeah, sure, whatever. No one, even when the pieces are all there for McCoy, who had to be told, because I think Johnston was saying, David Murray's house pretty nice, isn't it? And he's like, I guess it is. It was so remarkable.
Yes.
Even when all the pieces are just laid out there, the Rangers players involved, even the Scotland-England game on Hampden the following week, can't put those pieces together. Has to be absolutely spelled out to them. Yeah,
even like when you think about it as well, the media think they're going to see, there's names been John Sheridan, there's names all over the place, like Ray Houghton as well, he's been another name there. When you look at that press conference when they announced Johnston, Murray's face tells the story of what has happened. He knows what he's done. He knows he's done something historic for that club. That's the thing that gets me with that, and that's the thing I've kind of took away learning, kind of researching this. Murray knows this is a big moment.
He does, and so does Souness.
Yeah,
and
Souness had vowed to do it, though. Souness had vowed it from the beginning.
He had, and to be fair, he did it 3 weeks. Or not 3 weeks, it's 3 months after arriving, really, because John Spencer, who'd already been on S forms, was a Roman Catholic, and some of his family vowed never to speak to him again. In fact, that might still be in place, I don't know. And he kind of became of age that summer where he could sign proper form. So Souness's first Roman Catholic was John Spencer, but that wasn't enough. It had to be another one. It had to be a kind of big one. And listen, there really was no bigger. He had tried, as you mentioned, Houghton was interested from a football perspective, but didn't want anything to do with it really. And that was kind of that. And the fans kind of say, yeah, I mean, Jock Wallace said the same. Jock Wallace said he would do it, not quite in as affirmative tones as Souness had, but nothing came of that. So it'll be all right. From that press conference, the picture of Johnston so close to Souness, almost as if Souness is kind of cuddling, putting his arm over, like, I've got you. We're going to be protected. I mean, what did this do to Scottish society? What did it change? I think people have kind of got the wrong way around. I don't think this signing changed Scottish society. I think Scottish society had changed so that signing could take place. I think it was an open door waiting to be kicked down. I think 20 years before, certainly 30 years ago, there would have been riots at Ibrox. There would have been a boycott. This would have been a player of that kind of similar style. Because this isn't just a Roman Catholic, by the way. This is an ex-Celtic player who had written in his book that he pretty much hates Rangers and the support, and had enjoyed very much winding that support up in Firming. So this is not. It's not Ray Houghton. It's not John Sheridan. It's someone that's got nothing to do with that Glasgow thing. So it couldn't have been more explosive, but. In another generation or two previously, there would have been a boycott of sorts. It would have been utter carnage. But society changed by that point. You got a lot of secularization. Religion just isn't. People, they still talk that game, and the songs are still sung, but it's all about cosplay. And it started kind of there. And that's why it was allowed to happen. I know there's a wreath sent and there's tickets being burnt and strips being burnt. A lot of that was for show. A lot of that was kind of hyped up by the tabloids. And Johnston got a lot of hassle from both sides, from Celtic supporters probably more than anything else. And that makes sense. That's a football thing. Yeah. Wind it on a year to Florence, and Florence is burning because Roberto Baggio's going to Juventus. There's no sectarian division there. It's just that people take football too seriously, and that's what we never really want to kind of to grapple with. So it happened, and attendances boomed, and people got on with it because it was a construct in the head, the same way that generation before mixed marriage was a construct. It was, that could never happen, but and then it did, and people said, all right, and yeah, it was a football thing. And I think what it said more than anything else was about Johnston's professional. This was the dawn, I think, of the true professional. His easy move was to go to Celtic.
Absolutely.
He chose life with a minder for more money and more medals. That's the professional. That's what this, and the other myth, because, right, the signing policy, the signing practice, it should really be called. It was immoral, and it was technically illegal in terms of religious discrimination. Although I don't know the queues of Roman Catholic footballers that were queuing up to demand to play for Rangers, but the rational kind of pragmatic view at the club for many years was, right, you could sign a Roman Catholic and you could play him, but someone from that community, someone that's grown up supporting Celtic, someone that's played for Celtic, they're really going to give you everything. They're really going to go to the wall when it absolutely matters. They're going to bleed blue, and that's the myth that Johnston shattered, because for those 2 full seasons, he gave Rangers absolutely everything because he was a professional, and that was the dynamic. The old bygone traditions and people waxing lyrical about a thing that doesn't actually mean anything to their daily lives anymore, the way it once did in terms of the importance of the church and the chapel. That was kind of shattered. Rangers fans want winners. They want goal scorers. Yeah. And they want goal scorers against them.
And there's a bigger picture here as well. Like, there's the whole thing with the Souness, like Johnston even says it in the press conference. he's coming to the biggest club, one of the biggest in Europe, to go all the way in Europe. And we'll touch on Europe in a few minutes, because it's not a successful time for the club in Europe, and it's something we do need to talk about. But you mentioned there about a good start to the season before. This was not a good start in the league. 2 wins from 8 games, but it changes with a Johnston winning against Celtic, and it's all up from there.
It is. It was a disastrous start. 2 defeats the first 2 games, and then we went to Parkhead and got a point. Johnston misses one sitter, another good chance. But he scores against Aberdeen. He scores against Hearts. 1-0 wins. Huge games. And you mentioned there that dreadful start. What's important? Rangers, the Johnston's first goal against Aberdeen, we beat them 1-0. And it raises Rangers off the bottom of the league. That's just mental. But we're still only 3 points behind the top. And what that told you was that there's a pack of teams who will cut each other down. Mm-hmm. No one's going to run away. No one's going to get out of control. And that's kind of the story of that season. It's actually an interesting season for other reasons, nothing to do with religion or whatever else. As soon as we'll maybe touch on it when we talk about Europe in a minute, but I think he's experimenting. He doesn't have his target man. And Trevor Steven, David Cooper's gone. And Trevor Steven, he doesn't have a winger. This is a right midfielder that's a bit modern. He's experimenting tactically. It's a very compact Rangers team. We don't lose many goals, don't score hundreds. But I think, and I've said this in one show and I've written it in the book that will be out in a few months, hopefully. I think he kind of bottles it a wee bit in that tactical realisation. But the Celtic game at Ibrox, when he scores with 5 minutes to go, they arrived at Ibrox that morning, top of the league. Mm-hmm. Rangers would go top that night. Celtic would win. Out of the remaining 24 league games, they'd win 5. They wouldn't win another trophy for 6 years. There are bigger things at play there. That isn't about Maurice Johnston, but do not underestimate the immediate gut punch, because this is the thing they've been waiting for. It didn't happen at Parkhead. They mocked him when he missed a big chance to win the game. But at the back of their mind must always be, this is going to happen at some point. And when it happens, that's when they unravel. When that reality hits. He's not knocked in the third in a 3-1 win against them. He scored the only goal against them that's knocked them from the top. And that psychological blow cannot be underestimated, because they plummet after that. Absolute tailspin. Yeah.
The League Cup dominant run comes to an end with a 2-1 defeat against Aberdeen. Mason with the 2 goals. There's just this thing with Rangers in the League Cup, isn't there? And that's the one. I remember Paul Mason, obviously 2 goals. It's a weird one, isn't it? It's just a weird game.
It was a poor game. Aberdeen were well worthy of the win. I kind of grew up thinking that Skull, part of the contract was that Rangers had to be in the final. That seemed to be kind of how it went. There had been 3 brilliant League Cup finals before in different ways. The one against Celtic and then the 2 against Aberdeen. It couldn't continue. Mm-hmm. Couldn't continue in the quality and the entertainment. But Rangers couldn't just keep winning. It's cup finals, cup football. Anything can happen. And Souness and Smith had let them off the week before. They'd kind of gone for the more relaxed approach, and they'd given them a bit of time off instead of a real sharpness about it. And I think that maybe came through in that performance. It was a bit weird as a kid to have only ever seen 3 of these. We've won all 3. That's a bit odd that we haven't done it, but it has to happen sometime, I guess.
Scottish Cup, Celtic win. Celtic knock Rangers out in the quarter-final, so it's a league win by 7 points. It's 2 in a row. The whole thing getting into that summer was obviously the story with Terry Butcher leaving. He joins Coventry City later on, but there had been kind of problems brewing, hadn't there? There was between captain and manager. Wasn't case 2 big personalities clashing?
It always is with Souness, as it was with Roberts. He avoided one with Gough in the season before, where he effectively told him, "You're at it, injury-wise. You're feigning." and it's the only time that he's apologised. Not the name Goff, but he kind of apologised to the group, and Goff knew obviously what he was talking about, and that's kind of what saved that relationship. The Butcher thing, I don't think Butcher was hanging on by his own admission at the top level. He was struggling, and the leg break, and in those days leg breaks were still tough to come back from. He came back enough, but he was kind of hanging on by this point. This is 2 years later. Souness didn't want him to go to the World Cup, wanted him another kind of full summer off. There was no chance Terry Butcher was not going to Italian 90. Last time he knew, the last time he get, he had gone into a quarter-final before, famously, of course, and felt cheated out of that quarter-final, understandably. And there was just no way he was not going. And of course, then get that semi-final. But Butcher, that summer said, yeah, my time at that level is kind of done. Comes back struggling, if we're being honest. An own goal against Wraith, and then he in the cup, but he almost makes amends pretty immediately with an absolute rasper from 25-30 yards in the top corner. But there's an own goal at Tannadice, a bit of a shambles. And also, as soon as he's bought Kuznetsov, right? Kuznetsov's coming in, but not until October because of the USSR League. And the only way you're going to play Kuznetsov was with three at the back, which after the World Cup in 1990 was de rigueur, right?
That was a thing.
That's your thing. So he starts playing this three with players that have never played it. Like Gary Stevens in the back three, it's absolutely insane. So there's a bit of confusion as well there. And there's this calamity at Tannadice, and we lose the game through this headed own goal. And the League Cup semi-final against Aberdeen was coming kind of close. And I think Butcher again was kind of saying he wouldn't play, or he as soon as dropped him. And dropping Terry Butcher, I mean, he's just that you can't. And he was in tears. And he trained on his own, and he continued away, but it was very difficult. John Brown was a doubt for the final, the League Cup final that season against Celtic, and Terry Butcher played a couple of reserve games. It was quite tense, and Souness said, "Look, I need you," and he said, "I can't. I'm not in the right frame of mind." So basically, Souness saw that as his captain refusing to play a cup final. And that was pretty much that. Then we get an STV ban at this time because of Souness's touchline thing. Yeah. And Souness sees Butcher talking to Jim Delahunt and cameras just outside in Emerson Drive and goes berserk. And that's that.
And we'll touch on, obviously, who comes in. He finally gets Mark Gately, who he chased for.
Since the start.
Yeah, I think it was always a target man he wanted. Was that, at the time, was there a realisation there that McCoist and Johnston, who'd been a great partnership the season before, was there a realisation that McCoist was probably going to be the one to be sacrificed there?
There was a question about how this
because you don't sacrifice Johnston, do you? I think that's
no, and you shouldn't.
No.
McCoist and Johnston felt this was under threat, and when Hateley arrived to Il Choco that summer in 90, there's a fight. I mean, Johnston tries to batter him, and Hateley sorts them out effectively. Yeah. They try to blame it on Johnston drunkenly falling on Scott Nisbet's bed, and they'd taken the mattress away, and he cut his eye on a spring or some nonsense. So Johnston was angry at Souness for trying to split that up. But Souness wanted his target man. Hateley wasn't fit the year before. And the fans didn't get it. The fans still thought Hateley was the one keeping McCoist out. Of course it wasn't. It was actually Johnston. And this soap opera kind of starts. The way he does it, I mean, Souness starts this badly. Ali finds out from a mutual friend in Italy during the World Cup, who'd met Souness, and McCoist had been left out those opening 2 games, and said, "Oh, Ali's a bit down." He said, "All right, well, he's going to be even worse when he finds out I've just signed Mark Gately." Mm-hmm. So Souness already kind of playing these games, and he doesn't handle the situation well. There's this thing about Souness not being able to cope with not being the ultimate god at the club, and Ali is still more popular. But the bottom line is, if he wants to play this way, Haley Johnston's your combination at that point. Mo Johnston's a better player than Ali McCoist at this moment in time.
Yeah.
He just was.
Mm-hmm.
And Souness also felt, rightly, that McCoist wasn't at it. He wasn't sure. He wanted to light a fire a wee bit. There would have been other personal gripes as well. I don't. Yeah.
The Cheltenham thing later on probably adds fuel to that fire.
That's a shambles. I mean, that's a deliberate, nasty piece of work by Souness. McCoy said he was allowed to go. He had permission to go, and Souness and him had joked about the fact he had gone, and it was a reaction to a dreadful Old Firm defeat in the cup at Parkhead, and Souness used them really, and signs really that Souness himself is under unimaginable stress at this point in time.
But we'll touch on that towards the end. I want to obviously touch in Europe, the kind of 3 seasons we're touching on. The UEFA Cup in 88-89, obviously a 3-1 defeat to Cologne in the second round. When you look at that UEFA Cup, that's a huge opportunity missed.
It was. Bigger opportunity was Souness's first year, 86-87, the Mönchengladbach one, and you're thinking, given the way that draw opens out, Rangers could have been in that final against Gothenburg rather than Dundee United. Mm-hmm. But with that impact on winning the league, who knows? Yeah, Cologne, and it's one of these same old stories. Rangers were the first leg in Germany, coming straight after the Sunday Skull Cup final. Well, Souness doesn't make a sub. We talk so much about rotation and using a squad. There's energy sapping epic against Aberdeen. It just doesn't happen. And Rangers are good for 70 minutes in Cologne, and then just lose it, just lose the head. 2 goals, sendings off. I think a couple of sendings off at the end as well. Certainly Ali gets sent off, I think, and that's a thing that lack of composure. And then, I mean, the game's done.
Yeah. Bayern the year after as well. Bayern, we think of Bayern Munich now, and we think this powerhouse. At the time, they're not that, but they're still a pretty big force. Obviously, Mac and Ali's leading the line. They've got some very good players in that team, but even that, you're looking at a lot of these players that come in this time from England are obviously here because of the ban. This is their chance to get European football. These results are weird. Like Bayern Munich's obviously a big team compared to Rangers, but there's something about this. This team should have been doing better. Like Bayern Munich wiped the floor with them in that game.
They do. Rangers are ahead. Rangers should have been 2-0 up, or could have been 2-0 up actually, and then Bayern show their class. In Souness's defence, and he did say it, and he would say it. A couple of things. The Rangers never get knocked out by a poor team.
No,
I don't buy that. Someone has to lose, and West German teams are good. Here's a newsflash: West Germany, better standard football than Scotland at that particular time. Souness in 89-90 makes, right after this Bayern game. This Bayern game is actually quite pivotal for the history of European football. Internally, Souness makes the observation, a correct observation, that it's becoming too difficult to build a team that is physically capable of standing up to the fight domestically every week. And then on the odd Wednesday night, I have to give them different instructions about ball carrying and an approach and a more possession-based kind of game. You want me to sign players for completely different things. Our structure here, our style of football, the the amount of games we play is not conducive to just switching it on. Now, critics have said, well, Dundee United managed to get to a final, so that's garbage. The counter to that is Dundee United are not troubling trophy engravers at this time at all. And the pressure for Rangers to win every week is not something that Dundee United have to worry about. They can be a wee bit more expansive and think differently about how they approach league football, because no one expects them to win the league. So there's that. After Bayern, which is the first round of an open draw, and look at some of the ties, you get the champions of Malta playing the champions of Iceland, I think. There is a conversation in the Ibrox boardroom. What can we do about this? You could draw AC Milan.
Yeah.
And you're
Real Madrid draw Napoli as well in that year.
Yes. That was the year before. Yeah. And that's where Berlusconi says, like, this is nuts. We need a European Super League. You can't have these two giants together that early. We need a system where you get guaranteed revenue, guaranteed games, and you can hopefully hold the big boys back to win it. You know, it really matters. It's for the better tournament, which was a stalking horse. That European Super League was never going to happen. But it forced Rangers and Anderlecht were involved as well. Campbell Ogilvie puts the proposal together. So, like, have a group stage. You're guaranteed 3 home games. The revenue's there. You're in Europe until the spring. That was the solution. that came out really of that Bayern defeat. And it had to go back and forward. It had to be amended a few times, and then you have to say, right, we'll test that out. 91, 92. It works. It's going to be rebranded the next season as the Champions League, something completely different. So that was the response. But 1990, and that second round against Belgrade, that's the evisceration. That's the biggest hiding I think I've seen a Souness team really take. And I think he moans in the airport to journalists, how am I supposed to do this with 11 Scots? There were 6 English players playing in that starting 11, or 6 non-Scots, sorry, I think it was triple. And I think it's, in an ideal world, Scott, that's the end of that first Rangers revolution. Domestic success is pretty much in the bag. We need a new manager who's more tactically adept. We need more foreign players. The best of British has been great, and that's worked to a certain degree, but we need to look at these guys who can hold the ball and keep the ball for we need players who can do that. And that ideally would have been the big jump that Rangers made onto a second revolution, which was using the commercial power and the tendencies and the kind of exposure, not buying the best from Serie A, because that we knew we couldn't cope there, but there are loads more, and we need more than 3. Yeah. But we're hamstrung because of the former rule. And this takes place, actually, we record this the week before the 150th Open at St Andrews. It's agreed at the Old Course in St Andrews, a UEFA meeting in May 88, that they're going to limit this. The original limit was for 4. You can only play 4 foreigners, but they gave 3 years grace. So Terry Butcher would be Scottish effectively for 3 years, and Diego Maradona would be Italian for 3 years, and Mark Haley would be French or whatever. But any new signings would count as a foreigner. And then as of 91, 92, all bets are off. You can only play 4. 92, 93, that gets changed to 3 foreigners, to kind of naturalised players. So actually, for all the talk and all the ambition, and it was genuinely there, that ruling, I think, curtails that. I think that's absolutely fair. And to be very Souness, he doesn't go out to any nonsense that would characterise the 1990s. Yeah.
The one thing I want to kind of get your thoughts on before we talk about the kind of end of the Souness reign, the period of the time, the political period of the time, is obviously Thatcherism. Graeme Souness is a massive believer in those values. Is that fair to say?
Very fair to say. There's no hidden analysis there. He was an avowed Thatcherite. His little face in that picture when she came to Ibrox to do a Scottish Cup drawing in March or February 1990. Him and Murray. He's very much Thatcher's boy. That's correct.
Yeah, and the beginning of these problems, the STV thing you've touched on. There's the fallout with Alan Montgomery. Was he the treasurer or something?
He was the CEO.
CEO.
He was Murray's. I need a guy to run this. The way I've got guys that run everything. Alan Montgomery was a big personality. Mm-hmm. You cannot have Murray, Souness, and Montgomery, and he pissed Souness off.
Imagine that been a weird board meeting, can you not?
Well, board meetings became a kind of thing in the past. To be honest, they were kind of dying out. Murray just kind of ruled by decree or on phone calls to people that mattered for particular situations that demanded it. But yeah, Montgomery never lasted long because Souness hated him. That was that. Yeah.
The STV thing, obviously the touchline bans as well. The SFA are giving him, I think it was a 2-year ban as well. It's just there's so much to unpack, but you do, when you look at it, you do feel sympathy for Souness because you do think like there's all these things, and you see it with even Gerrard this recently. It's hard to keep someone interested when they're getting the thoughts of going elsewhere.
And it just all consuming. And he's too big. He's too big a personality. His managerial career is a funny one because the kind of narrative is that he kind of disappointed, didn't he, really, other than, that cup win with Galatasaray and a decent run with Blackburn and things like that. And the FA Cup win with Liverpool, obviously. And therefore, he was just a bit of a flash in the pan. I don't think he was a flash in the pan here. He made some good decisions as a manager, but football was going to change. It was going to change very quickly, and he couldn't really adapt to that. But what he was a force of nature. Mm-hmm. Smith was his coach. He did a lot of that stuff, but it was as soon as force of personality that was saying we are not going to get kicked around anymore, and this is over. That can only last so long, Scott. He was picking fights with everybody. He's picking fights with opponents, obviously. He's picking fights with the media, tea ladies. He's picking fights with the authorities, really. I mean,
and you don't even, it doesn't matter if you're Graeme Souness, you very rarely win those fights.
Not over the long haul. No. I mean, you get to a stage where he could have been banned for 10 years.
Yes.
Which is draconian nonsense. And he was picking fights with the supporters. There was an interview in Radio Clyde and at Ibrox early 1991 when the crowd really weren't happy with this striker situation. And he basically called them out. So don't come here and sit in your hands and complain.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've seen that.
So, that's not... He's fighting everybody. He needs out, and he gets an opportunity to do that. Yeah,
the situation comes about, and it's a funny one as well because it all kind of interlinks in a weird way. April 1991, Kenny Dalglish chooses to leave Liverpool. Obviously, his mental capacity had probably got to a certain point as well, and Souness seems to be the choice for Liverpool straight away, but. This is the first test. Would you say this is the first test of Murray's character as Rangers owner because he has to make that decision?
Yeah. I mean, Dalglish goes in the late February. Liverpool come as soon as he says no, I can't, and they come again, and that's where the St Johnston, the draw, when Aggie and all that kind of nonsense with the smashed orange juice, and he was driving home from that saying, I need to get out here. I need to take that job. This is, why am I shouting it? This is insane. Speaks to Smith and well, this is the thing, the accounts. Soon as he's got what 2 or 3 books, and I'm sure he's got different accounts
for each book.
And Walter's accounts a bit different. But basically, he decided he was going, and again, Murray and Souness are out at dinner, and it's like a marriage come at the end. Murray's driving him home to his apartment, and he says, "You're going to take that Liverpool job, aren't you?" And they have a conversation outside on a wall outside Souness' apartment in a early spring kind of night, talking about the future and what's going to happen. And Souness does, and Murray does. His initial reaction is like, "Hold on, take it, you're out. Be a director of football, something. Go upstairs. We'll cope. Let's not be hasty." And then there's a kind of resolve. Like, actually, nah, you kind of need to go. Murray wanted to consider options, but Smith, I think, played a clever game by saying, "Look, what's the score here?" Because if Murray said, "No, I'm getting Beckenbauer in," then Smith probably does need to assess Souness's offer to come down to Anfield and be number 2, because he might not have a job here. But Murray senses that Smith is there. Souness has already said, "Look, I think you should. We have no issues with Water stepping up." Goff says the same thing. And on the Saturday, Souness is still in charge by this point. The Saturday at home to Hibs, I think it's a 0-0 draw. It's not. Rangers win. Ian Durrant scores, I think, his first goal back maybe after that injury. And Murray's already told Smith, "You're fine, you can take it." And the rest of the country's guessing for a week. Because I think it comes out on the Tuesday, doesn't it? And on the Friday, Murray announces that it's Water.
Yeah. From Murray's perspective, we look at Murray and obviously the way he deals with managers, and it's not what you see here. That he gets this spot on. He's dynamic. He does what he needs to do. He steps his ground. He could have easily let Souness stay to the end of the season if he thought that was best, but he does what he thinks best, and that's the Murray that we don't really see from here on in.
Well, early Murray's ruthless. Some would argue, and we would do this debate on dominant just this weekend, actually, that David Edgar's view is that Murray couldn't sack managers because it would mean him admitting publicly got something wrong.
Yes, I think that's fair.
Yeah, but he sacked other people. I mean, Montgomery, an example of that early on. And yeah, the easy option would be to keep Souness, because that league title's, Rangers are favourites, but it's it's precarious. But the counter argument is that Souness has hurt him, and he's been pretty decisive about it. And that was talking about press conferences. I mean, that's fascinating. That's couples counselling 101 right there. And Souness goes to try and, but it's been painted as Souness being the scolded schoolboy with the headmaster. That's just this nonsense. That's a couple breaking up, and Souness goes to kind of put his arm in the back of Murray's chair. He says, "I want to be here, I want to stay." Can make that clear. And they can hardly look at each other. And Murray's quite, even early doors, he's quite good in front of the cameras. He's quite good in front of the media. He's quite smooth. He's not good that day. No. He is
because it's a personal thing for him as well. It's because of the friendship. Yeah, it's the friendship.
Yeah. Which he would later foster with Walter, and I'm sure you got into that in other shows, that, and I certainly will on my show. But what that kind of dynamic, the impact of that dynamic and decisions that could maybe have been made. So it did cut him. But he, at that point, I'd say Murray from 88 to 93, 94 probably, he's pretty ruthless. Yeah,
he's very, very dynamic. But as you say, there's a league championship still to be won. There's speculation that it's Kenny Dalglish, George Graham, Franz Beckenbauer, but I think there's only one man that can take over, and Walter Smith obviously takes over a press conference in a week's time, which is a totally different environment in the same area, that Walter Smith takes the job. And 4 games left, and it's between Rangers and Aberdeen. 2 tight 1-0 wins over St Mirren and Dundee United, and Rangers in the driving seat. But an away defeat to Motherwell certainly puts it on a knife edge going into that last day.
That's one way of putting it. I mean, for Park, we can't rewrite history, and it's important to say. You said there that Walter Smith was the only option. For the fans, he was not.
No, he was
The
not.
fans are now expecting big things. There's talk of Beckenbauer, there's talk of George Graham, who's about to win the title in England. So, and Dalglish is,
do you think Dalglish was ever realistic at that point?
Dalglish was fried.
Yeah,
Dalglish.
I think later on, yeah, there's merit to it, but at this point, no.
Blackburn, when it came up, the next season, not long, but I think that's a perfect project for him. But not Ibrox. He was emotionally drained. But the fans were expecting a name, so there was a bit of all right. And even then, the bookies didn't pay out, or some bookies didn't pay out on Smith for quite a wee while because, well, is he really the real Rangers manager? Is this maybe just a caretaker role to the end of the season? So there was the feel about that. For Park, we go for Park with the potential of winning the title because if our result goes well, Aberdeen at home to St Johnstone, if they drop points, we're champions. So there's that feeling of possibility about it. But probably what's going to happen is Aberdeen and Rangers will probably win quite narrow wins, and then that means that Aberdeen need to come to Ibrox and win something like 5-0. And as well as they're playing at the moment, that's not going to happen. So it makes it a kind of defunct thing. And then, of course, we're 1 down, we miss a penalty. Mark Walsh doesn't really miss penalties and nothing's going in. Ali Maxwell's having a great old time. I wish he kept that up. And then Dougie Arnott scores this breakaway goal. Archie Knox is still, and Walter's still waving Rangers players on. Now, we're not going to get 2 goals, probably, to get that point. We're still top of the league at 2-0. So the smart money is just batten down, right? Take your medicine and move on. We go to Ibrox in the driving seat, barely the barest of margins, but we're still top. And we're still leaving all this space. And it's ridiculous space that we've left behind for the exact same goal. Aberdeen hear that in the dressing room, or when they get back, they beat St Johnstone 2-1, and David Robertson talks about it, wild cheering because they're now top of the league. And that third Motherwell goal changes Rangers history, because if it is 2-0 and Rangers are crawling to this title, it is not good. Football's not good. That's Sandy Robertson goal in Smith's first game at Love Street. Brilliant goals it was, late on, scrappy stuff. Aberdeen have taken 23 points out of 24, 2 points for a win in those days. They're scoring bags of goals. We are not. They're playing in this 4-3-3 that's very fluid and very together. And if they came in needing to win, I think they would have won. But they don't. They go to a 4-4-2. They've got a big blow that still does us out. They've got to play Michael Watt. Now, again, let's not rewrite history. Michael Watt's played at Ibrox before and played very, very well before. He's been a standout. Mark Hateley doesn't know that. Mark Hateley thinks he's a ball boy or something like that when he's warming up, and thinks, is this their goalie? I'm on that. Get it. Gary Stevens, get one up high. He's going to get caught in the wind. I'm going to level this boy, and I'll see what Aberdeen do. And he does. And McLeish, Brian Irvine don't want to know. And Hateley says, right then, we're not going to win. But the whole mood, Scott, and you get players broken. You get John Brown, who's told, if you play today, your Achilles will snap. And he plays. He's at Ibrox at 10 o'clock in the morning, battering his head off walls and getting him, absolute psycho mode. You've got McCoist and Durant on the bench, who are not fit, not anywhere remotely fit. You get Tom Cowan breaks his leg, and you're shuttling players into left back. They've never played there. But Ian Ferguson talks about it. McCoist talks about it. Mark Wallace talks about it. They were like, we're going to win. We're going to win. And the pressure's off. The support turn up at Ibrox, knowing we need to win, and therefore everything's positive. If we were hanging on that day, that support would have been a nightmare. And Aberdeen, they just get caught between two stools. They miss big chances, and they're talking. McLeish is saying 5 minutes, for another 5 minutes, and they're getting towards half time. He says to Robertson, 5 more minutes, and then Walter swings in that cross, and away we go. But that's the sliding doors, that whole 9-0 thing. Because as much as I love that Rangers team, and as much as I love Rangers in general, Aberdeen would have won the title if Motherwell had won 2-0.
Yeah, it's absolutely a sliding doors moment. The whole period that we touch on, that we obviously lead on to Smith, and later on in the next episode we'll touch on the 91 to 95 era, but the whole Souness legacy. What's your takeaway from the Souness revolution as it's been known?
The Souness revolution, which I would argue ends in I've said that on the show, and that's where my next book kind of stops at 1992. It ends in the summer of 92, because of wider changes, and because I just think that the Steam's kind of the Rangers revolution, rather than just the Souness thing. But his part on it, from Easter Road onwards, Rangers are not going to get kicked about. You mentioned Thatcher a while ago. That whole revolution is a Thatcherite revolution.
Yeah,
it's probably the biggest and best application of Conservative policy than Thatcher's government could ever dream of doing, and it happens on the banks of Clydeside. It's very ironic.
Yes,
it is dynamic. It's abrasive. It's ambitious. It's wage caps. Fuck your wage caps. I want the biggest here. I want the best here. They're coming here. Traditions. Don't care about your traditions. Don't care how that affects communities. It's results. I'm only interested. I don't care how you feel. We're going to play this way. And that kind of swagger, that kind of force of personality excited and enthused the support. And my big takeaway, actually, for the Rangers revolution and what it led to is obviously 9-0 and whatever, is for all the because it was modernisation. That's as soon as the whole thing was really becoming less Scottish, and that's why the revolution kind of dies in 92 because of various other things. But Rangers have to be more Scottish than ever before, really. But for all the modernisation and future looking and barrier breaking, probably the biggest impact of that time is with the past, and Rangers fans understanding the past, their past, and understanding of themselves. Because when Souness arrives, we're only 2 league titles ahead of Celtic, and we owe that to a bygone era of the 20s and 30s in Struth, and an era where there's no footage and it's not live, and you'd be 76. You'd probably be in your mid-70s when Souness arrives as a Rangers supporter, to know what it's like to have utter repeated success. Yeah. Rangers only regain a title or retain a title twice since the Second World War by this point. Celtic are the preeminent team in Scotland for 2 generations. And what that time did was give a sense of superiority and swagger and supremacy back. And this generation, my generation, were experiencing something that only people in their 70s and 80s experienced before. Yeah. And that's a big time. So what it did, it fueled an old story. It gave a lot of life back into this belief, a Struth kind of belief, that you might have a bad season, you can't win everything, but when you don't win something, that's the exception to the rule. And the rule is that Rangers' top is the natural order of things. That's what it gave back to the club.
And obviously the dynamism of Murray in this era for that first 3 years, and we will go on to talk about Murray and his effective way of using the media and his overall drive to go that extra yard in Europe. But Murray at this point, what's the feel of him in 1991? If you were to say in 1991, what's the opinion of David Murray? Is it just an ambitious guy, something different to what the Rangers fans have ever seen before?
What's the opinion of David Murray in 1981? Well, we know, because the fanzines are there and the tabloid hotlines are there. We know what the Rangers fans thought at the time, and there are some concerns, but overall, especially the handling of the Souness affair, This guy's good. Is he a world away from David Holmes? I don't really think so. They're different people in many respects, but again, that ambition and ruthlessness and life, energy, dynamism, it's pretty much the same thing. And I think what you've got from 86 to 92 is probably the ideal form of leadership, chairmanship, stewardship, call it what you want, for the period. Before Holmes, you have a board meeting every Tuesday to talk about board meetings. Nothing happens. There's no overall majority shareholder. There's no movement. It's stagnant. People are on the board of Ibrox because they see it as a hobby. There's no drive there, which is ironic given the amount of car dealers that are on the Rangers board. There's stasis. There's no bigger thinking. Marlborough's deal with Jack Gillespie, which is a huge moment in history, breaks all that. So you do then have someone in Holmes and then Early Murray, who are the antithesis of all that. They can move, they can shake things up, they can push forward. They see a bigger picture than anyone in Scotland seeing, and they build it. And we came after, and Murray talks about this, I think November 94 maybe, where he said, "No, we don't really have board meetings. I'll speak to someone if I need to speak to them." And that corporate governance decays and decays. Now, people at Campbell Ogilvie, for example, will say for 10 years we didn't have a problem. He was making the right calls, and we were left to do. He was left to do his football admin thing. The finance guys were left to do their thing, and that was fine. So my takeaway would be, in sport and history, the circumstances change a hell of a lot quicker than people do. So Holmes and David Murray and that period and the circumstances and the window of opportunity that was there in 86 to 92 are ideal. Football changes in 1992 in a way that no other year can provide, in my opinion.
Yep.
And macro things outside of David Murray's control. He can't do deals to stop the breakaway Premier League in England. Yeah. Once we've created this Champions League, we've created a monster that goes and swallows us up. That's when you need corporate governance. That's when you need a proper board, a group think, more than one guy just kind of ruling by decree. But then you're asking for someone to be a completely different person than the person you were lauding 10 years ago. I don't think it works like that. So the whole story around your success right now, where you are in your chronicles, is the right choices being made in the right circumstances. Rangers were perfectly positioned for the opportunities that the world football gave them in 1986 and for those 6 years, in ways that other clubs in Scotland weren't, because of the stadium, because of the ambition and the use of overdraft. The right people in the right place, but they weren't the right people when that changed, and that's really the story, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And on next week's episode of Chronicle, we will look at what happens when Walter Smith takes over in 91 and builds his own team, has to enforce that Scottish element into the squad. 92-93, we look at an unforgettable season that almost ends in the ultimate glory, and the establishment of dominance, as you say. I'm using a phrase of Martyn's, a dominant period in Scottish football. That was this week's episode of Chronicle. I want to thank Martyn for helping me with this episode of the journey. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Oh, pleasure to talk about this. It's a good time, interesting time. Maybe we don't understand it as maybe well as we should. So no, it's been a joy. It's a good idea for a show.
It is an absolute pleasure as always, and thank you very much to everyone who's tuned in. And please join us on the rest of the Rangers journey.